Hi, my name is Stephen Bohachik. I'm going to talk about how I've been using GPT to grade and give hints for questions with short answers. So the key takeaways of the talk are that indeed I am able to use LLMs to grade and give hints. And you can take a look at some of my ideas. I made a website where you can edit and manage the rubrics, which is a key part of this idea. You can log in with this email and this password. It's very much a prototype, so be gentle with it. It crashes a lot and like that, but you can see the basic ideas. So, but it does work. I am able to grade and give hints, and I think it really improves the student's experience. But it is difficult. Writing the rubrics, writing the prompts is a difficult process, and we'll talk about that. What's not possible is to simply ask the LLM to grade the student's submission. So we don't use LLMs like that. Instead, we use LLMs as text processing engines. We'll talk about that. Another important thing that we found after a lot of work is that you must clean the submissions before you can grade them. You got to fix the typos, the grammar and spelling and other things. It took us a long time to figure that out, but that's true. Okay, so I'm a professor of computer or electrical and computer engineering. So I don't really do much research in teaching, but I do teach some large classes. And I always have a challenge with grading, or with the graders. They're slow to grade, right? They're taking other classes, they're doing the research. So I understand grading is not their first priority, but it is important for the students. And the comments, I mean, who wants to write, the same comment 150 times? It is very tedious work. And the grading sometimes is not right. Frequently it's not right. Experienced graders know that if they're easy graders, they're going to reduce the chances of students complaining to the instructor. And sometimes the questions are not good, right? This isn't really a TA or a grader's problem. This is the professor's problem. The questions are a little bit ambiguous. So what we've done is I've used Canvas. So we use Canvas so students can enter their answer into Canvas quizzes. And we use quizzes because then we can access their answers via an API. Then the submissions are automatically graded and hints are generated. So here's what a Canvas quiz looks like. We have the student's question up the question here, and this is where the student can enter their answer. And then after it's graded, the students do this. They see the question, they see their answer, and here we see the automatically generated comments. And here is the automatically generated score. The students are allowed to resubmit as many times as they want. They can use the entire semester. However, in the past I've made it that the grading takes at least 24 hours. The idea is I didn't want students to just try something and then try something again and so on. I wanted them to give a little more thought into what they're submitting. However, drawback of that is I think students will tend to lose interest if they're right. So there maybe there's some trade-off between 24 hours and seconds. And then also, if the student wants a more personal feel, or if they think that the grading is wrong, then they can request a manual review. They would put that into their answer. They would type it right here, and then we would look at the current submission and past submissions. And this is an important part of making rubrics. We'll talk about that in a bit. So students really take advantage of this approach. So this is a histogram of the number of attempts. We see that around 20% of the students just made one attempt on this question. But most students make multiple attempts, even all the way up to 10 attempts. And the grades are significantly improved. So the red is a histogram of the grades. The red is the histogram of the grades of the initial submission, and the blue is the grades of their final submission. So we see a significant improvement in the students' grades. And there was a lot of grading going on. So it was this class about 60 students. We graded, or the computer graded, about 25,000 questions. That's a lot of grading. It's way too much for a grader, but for computer, it's just fine. But it also illustrates that the students are doing a lot of work too. So this is another approach, another way to get students to do more work and to learn more. So the first attempt at making an autograder didn't work, and it was a straightforward idea. I thought it would have worked. The idea is you just tell the LLM, below is a student's submission to some particular question, and the desired answer is something along these lines. That works sometimes. It works a lot, but it doesn't work all the time. In the typical case where it doesn't work is something like this. So here's the question, and then here is the desired answer. It starts with no, blah blah blah, and then here's a submission. The student says yes, blah blah blah, and then GPT says yes, the student answered it correctly. Right? That's wrong. It's pretty simple, right? Right here it says no. The correct answer is no. The student starts out with yes. Pretty clear that would be the wrong answer, but LLMs get it wrong. So this is a common thing. They get it right. There's remarkable cases where the LLMs get it right, but they don't get it right enough to have an automatic grading system. There's enough errors that you have to check it manually, defeating the whole purpose of an automatic grader. So the reason is, I believe, is that this task of grading a problem, just saying did the student get it right? It's very big, and it's quite complicated. The main complication is the idea of context. We want the student to make the correct answer in the context of what is taught in the class, right? And the LLM has so much other context of all of it. It's training data. So it's hard for it to focus on the context of the class. Looking back at this thing, a lot of what's written here is correct, but the final conclusion of yes is wrong. But so depending upon the context, there is some accuracy in that answer, but the final conclusion is wrong. So what we do for things which are complicated is we break them into small pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask the LLM if the submission addresses specific points. So here's an example. So here's a question about history. I don't teach history, but here's a question about the Louisiana Purchase. And we expect the answer to address these 6 elements. So for each element, we're going to make a prompt. So for the first element, the prompt is, does the submission mention this? For the second one, we ask the LLM, does the submission mention this? And so on. And then we can even be more specific. Here, if we look at this particular prompt, or I should say that we call these components. These are each a component, and to get full credit, the student has to address all components. But even here, we see this single component is a bit complicated. Economic growth and development. So are we expecting the student to mention economic growth and economic development? So both things. And also, this is economic development, I assume, although it doesn't say economic development. So I'm not sure what we expect the LLM to do here. If the student just replies economic growth, is that okay? Or do they have to say economic growth and, right? Is this sort of in quotes, so they have to say both of those things? So it's not very clear as to what we want. And I think I think the truth is we want them to mention economic growth or economic development. So we can divide this into 2 parts. We can connect them with the or. So the student can answer each student can answer either of these correctly. Right? They can mention economic development, or they can mention economic growth, or either one. Even that is a bit much. We have this other and here. So instead, we're going to further break it up. So we're going to say that the submission should mention that that the Louisiana Purchase expanded agricultural potential, and either one of these. All right, so we see that we've taken this one prompt for one component, and we divide it into a number of prompts to get the full credit, you follow this the Boolean expression here. So we have and, so it has to be this one and either one of these. Here's another example. So here's one, again, synonyms can be a problem because there can be a lot of context. There's synonyms in the context of the course. So here's a problem from cybersecurity, and we're looking for something that mentions verify, ensure, protect, or determine the integrity of the message or the authenticity. Again, do we want the submission to mention all of these? Or what we want them to do is mention verify, or mention ensure, or mention protect, or mention determine. And they can mention integrity, or they can mention authenticity. So we program that exactly they want. They can mention verify the integrity, ensure the integrity, verify authenticity, and so on. You look at the words integrity and authenticity; those aren't really synonyms. And in cybersecurity, they're not as well. These have very specific meanings in cybersecurity. And they're not synonyms in cybersecurity. However, in the context of digital signatures, for historical reasons, authenticity is sort of the older word. The more appropriate word these days is integrity. However, we can accept authenticity because it's for historical reasons. So the LLM would never be able to figure out these sorts of things, that in this context, authenticity is a synonym for integrity. In other contexts, it's not. And also it depends on, on that this is cybersecurity. So we program into the rubric exactly what we mean, very precisely, right? It can be any one of these is sufficient. And then we add on other things. Again, more problems with synonyms. Here we're looking for this particular component. They can mention common passwords, probable passwords, possible passwords, password possibilities, or anything vaguely similar. And the submission says potential passwords. Well, that should definitely fit the bill, but no. The LLM says no, it doesn't mention that. So we add in some extra text at the end to say, note, other topics are discussed as well. And then we get a yes. So the LLM was getting confused about because there's other things that were mentioned. So the LLM was confused with that. We just said, so once we added this, then it worked. So we make templates for various prompts, and some of those are in the app. You can look at some of those, but I have many more in the back end that I'm adding. Okay, so just stepping back for a second. So we don't really use LLMs to grade the submission. Right? We don't ask the LLM, did the student answer this question correctly? Instead, we're asking the LLMs to answer very specific questions about the submission. Did it cover this? Does it mention this? It's a very specific question. So we're not really using the LLM as an AI. We're really just using it as a text processing engine, a very sophisticated text processing engine. So that's the grading part. Then we have hints as well. So we may have a rubric that looks a little like this. So this is the part if they get it correct. If this prompt comes back yes, it comes back, then they get it's correct. And but if this is wrong, then we have some common errors. So for example, if they mentioned that Thomas Jefferson was the first president, then we can give this specific hint. This is what we write. We wrote this prompt. We write this hint. And the hint says, something about what you should do, and then points back to the course material as to how to improve. So it's very specific prompt and very specific hint, and we can have many of these common errors. So with all these common errors, we can look at how a student or students progress through a particular component. They start here, and if they get it correct, they end up down here. And they stop off at different common errors. And things can happen. For example, the student can come, see this hint, and then end up back at the same place. That happens a few times in this problem. Right? So that's a little interesting because the hint should have been enough to get them to the next step or to the correct answer. And students sometimes give up. We see that one person gave up here, 4 gave up here. That's not good. Here's a bigger question, or a more complicated question. Lots of hints that we give to guide the student to the final solution. Here's an interesting case, because this is not a good situation. So this is a smaller class, but we see that most of the students, 3 students got it correct in the first try. 13, so a large majority of the class ended up here with a very sort of generic hint. And then we saw that 12 of the students read the hint, I suppose they read the hint, tried again, and didn't make any progress. 5 then gave up. So we look at this, and this tells us, okay, something's wrong here. So this hint is not very good. Maybe we need more specific errors, right? So we make very specific errors and say if they did this kind of mistake, then we give them this sort of hint. In any case, what this shows is that we can use these plots that show that students' progress through a component, and we can improve the teaching material. We can improve the rubric with the common errors, or maybe give a pointer to a video. So we have some sort of data-driven teaching. Here's the process of making rubrics. So we start out with some questions, and we make some initial rubrics for that. Sometimes in the process of making the rubrics, we realize the question is not so good. So we do some iteration there. Then we open the assignment, but we keep the grades hidden. Then we have some early submissions, and the auto grader is going to grade those. Then we manually look at the auto grading results. And if the rubric isn't right, the hints don't look clear, then we edit the rubric. So usually the rubrics are hard to write, so initially they're not very good. So we edit the rubric, and then everything is then regraded. And we keep on iterating through this several times until the rubrics seem perfect with these early submissions. Then, if the rubrics seem pretty good, then we open everything so the students can see their grades and see these comments. Now more students are going to submit, and these early submissions are going to resubmit, so we have more auto grading and more submissions going on. In parallel to that, some students are going to see the comments and the grade, and they're maybe going to be confused. So maybe the comment isn't correct, or maybe the rubric didn't perform correctly. In that case, then we can edit the rubric and then regrade everything again. Or we can go back to this sort of pictures. We see these pictures, something seems amiss. Again, then we can edit the rubric and do this. And then after you do this sum, the rubrics get to be pretty solid. In the second semester, third semester of teaching your course, you really shouldn't need to do much more editing in the rubrics. You pretty much are always in this state. Although students will still like to have a personal view of you to check the work to make sure it's okay. That happens fairly regularly, but we have a user interface to quickly evaluate and check their work. Another important point is cleaning submissions. So if the student submission is ambiguous, then it's very hard to grade. So even humans can't grade it, because the first step is try to figure out what the student was trying to say. There's a lot of ambiguity there. So two people can look at the same statement. One person can try to figure out what the student was trying to say. The other person can look at what the student actually said, and then their grades are going to be different. So if humans can't agree, pretty sure the LLM is not going to do a good job there. So we need to clean the submission. So first thing is we cleaned typos. If it's a minor typo, it's fine. We're gonna fix it and then grade. If it's a major problem, then it's going to be rejected. And the student, of course, has more tries. So we tell the student that there's a typo, fix the typo, and then resubmit. They can resubmit as many times as they want. So it's not a big deal to reject typos and grammar errors and spelling errors. And inconsistencies too. If the answer is inconsistent, then we reject it, and they have to redo it. Similarly, off track, or if there's just random characters, which occasionally happens because they cut and pasted incorrectly. But it's hard to fix typos and grammar because the LLM wants to make a lot of changes, and those changes can be wrong. For example, the student might write the first president was Thomas Jefferson, and the LLMs try to fix the typos because you ask the LLM to fix these mistakes, even though you were very clear about you must fix typos and whatnot. It may fix this typo with that and change the meaning. So there's a lot of prompt engineering and other text processing to really focus on just fixing typos and spelling errors. So it seems like an easy thing. It's quite tricky, but it's very important because without unambiguous statements, it's very hard to grade. And inconsistencies too. You have to get rid of inconsistencies. Here is a student, they said the answer is 2, and then later they say the answer is 5. Right? So if our rubric says, does the student's submission say the answer is 2, it would say, yep, it's 2. Does the student's submission say the answer is 5? Yep, it's okay. So this is not going to work. So we ask LLM to verify that the submission is consistent. And if it has inconsistencies, then we return a comment that tells the user how their submission is inconsistent. Similarly, with off track, you have students who will tend to just submit way too much material and not focus on the question. So we just have the LLM check it if the submission is off track, and then submit. And then if it is, it gives information as to how it's off track. So impact on grades. For some of the material, the grades are higher. Here, the red is the previous semester without auto grading. The blue is with auto grading. So we see a significant jump in the grades here. But for this question, or for this homework, the grades were lower. So these two homeworks were fairly straightforward homeworks, and this homework is a quite challenging homework. And the auto grading is very strict. So when the manual grading was grading this problem, the students were close enough on these challenging problems, so they're given high points. So in any case, the impact on grades is going to be mixed because it's really a different situation. Okay, and then conclusions. I'm going to jump from conclusions and just take a look at the app. So you can log in here. Again, this is a very buggy thing, but you can log in there so that it should eventually come up to the login page. You put in demo and demo, and password is demo. And then here you select, it should bring you to the settings page. And here you select a course. There's only one course, and enter in the subject area so we get the context, cybersecurity. And then you can look at these tabs here. So this one is rubric editor. That is this step here. Here is student submissions. That is this step here. And then we have manual review. That's here where the students have requested a manual review. And student progress. That's for here too. So take a look at the app. You can play around with it. It might be something interesting there.